So 4 years ago, when the district came back from state administration, there had been a series of attempts to put different reforms in motion to basically try different approaches to putting programs in place in different kinds of schools. Over the last 4 years, this board, now in local control, has worked on creating a plan, creating scorecards, and now with the approval of budget priorities has actually created a coherent plan for the first time since 1992 when there was the first introduction of a long-range plan. So we have been in process and following through for the first time in many years on an accountability structure where for the first time we've been public about what we're trying to accomplish, collecting data on it, and giving reports to the board. We've also been making really hard decisions driven by a set of priorities that this board approved, and then making hard decisions. We've increased per pupil allocation, we've increased a focus on attendance, and tonight we have a chance to have an accountability report on how we've done. We obviously took this up last year, about a year and a half ago, and really where it became clear that we needed to pay deeper attention to chronic absence, and up to and including looking at how we were taking attendance at every site. It was an initial inquiry, and we gathered data, and now tonight we have a chance to have staff and folks from schools provide testimonial and tell you the story. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Curtis Siricki, who's going to introduce and take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent, and good evening, Board of Directors. We're really pleased to have this opportunity tonight to present to you a really significant body of work around keeping our kids in school. And so I can't think of anything more important for us to get to tonight, and I'm glad it's the first study session. Just before I get started, I really wanted to appreciate and introduce all of the incredible people we have on the panel, that we're going to do this as a team so that we can really demonstrate the work that's happening centrally and also on the ground at our school sites. And so Jean Wing, the Executive Director with Research Assessment and Data, Teresa Clancy, our Coordinator for Attendance and Discipline Support Services, Kimmy Keene, our Executive Officer for Region 3, Cliff Hong, the Principal at Roosevelt Middle School, and Elena Witt-Smith, the Principal at Markham Elementary School. So you have the PowerPoint in front of you, and I don't know if that screen that you're looking at, you can see it, so we will, beautiful, we'll track it along. So tonight we're going to talk about why reducing chronic absenteeism matters, what we're doing, where are we now, how's it going, and what are we learning. I just want to let you know there's a lot of information in this presentation. We're going to try to be really efficient so we have time for dialogue and for public comment. We also, during the presentation, have some artifacts that we're going to pass around for review to show you some of the tools that we've developed. You already got it. So I want to start by sharing some definitions so we have a common understanding of what it is when we refer to these terms throughout the presentation. So the first one is what we usually hear about when we think about attendance, which is average daily attendance, and that is the percentage of enrolled students who attend school each day. Satisfactory attendance is attending school 95% or more of school days in an academic year. Chronic absence, which is missing 10% or more days of school in an academic year for any reason, excused or unexcused. And then truancy, which refers only to unexcused absences and is defined by each state. And in California, it's missing 3 days of school without a valid excuse, or being late 30 minutes or more to class 3 times without a valid excuse. Chronic absence is key because research shows that when students miss 10% or more of school days for whatever reason, it will have a negative effect on student learning. This negative effect is even greater for students living in poverty. And for Oakland, this means chronic absence is missing 18 or more days a year, so it's about a month of school. On to the next slide on our district-wide targets. OUSD has set clear district-wide targets for attendance, starting with the adoption of the strategic plan in June of 2011. These are our OUSD attendance goals for all schools. They appear in the strategic plan, on the balanced scorecard, in the community school strategic site plan, and in school quality review data profiles for each school. There is a direct connection between chronic absenteeism and school success. OUSD is addressing chronic absence as a core area of focus to support our students in becoming college, career, and community ready. Just to emphasize that our ADA goal, our average daily attendance goals, we want all schools to achieve 98% daily attendance. And the reason for that is schools with a 90% ADA do not run the risk of high underlying rates of chronic absenteeism. Our chronic absence goal is that we want all schools to reduce the total number of chronically absent students to 5% of the student population or less. The school can then focus on supporting a small number of schools who really need the additional support. And our satisfactory attendance goal is that we want at least 85% of students with satisfactory attendance defined as attending 95% of school days. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Jean Wing to continue. Yeah.
So as Curtis just stated, chronic absence, missing 10% or more of school days for any reason, does have a direct impact on academic achievement, both short-term and long-term. In research by Attendance Works and others, 10% actually represents a tipping point at which the impact really can be seen. And this happens whether students miss 18 days all at once or whether they miss a couple here, a couple there throughout the year. In Oakland, as across the nation, we actually see that our chronic absence tends to be highest in kindergarten and first grade, and then spikes up again in high school, most notably at 9th and 10th grades. Chronic absence in the early K-1 years, as you can imagine, has a negative effect on that crucial grade 3 reading, and which in turn can affect a student throughout their school years. So those early years really count. In OUSD, we found that chronically absent students were about half as likely to score proficient or advanced on the English Language Arts California Standards Test, and they're about twice as likely to be represented in below basic or far below basic as their non-chronically absent peers. And we found a similar pattern in California Standards Test in mathematics as well. Okay. At the high school level, Chicago research shows that 9th grade attendance was a key predictor of high school graduation 4 years later. It was actually a better predictor than 8th grade test scores. For every week of school that a 9th grader missed, a student's odds of graduating 4 years later was dramatically reduced. So for example, a Chicago student who missed 0 to 4 days in the 9th grade had an 87% chance of graduating. But a student who missed just 5 to 9 days dropped to just a 63% odds of graduating. And students who missed 2 or 3 weeks of school dropped to 41%. So this is 9th grade predicting 4 years later. Why not just look at ADA? We actually compared several OUSD schools, 6 OUSD schools, all with an ADA of 95%, which sounds kind of high, right? They're all at 95%, but we found that there was an underlying chronic absence rate that varied quite widely from school to school. So across those 6 schools, one of them with a 95% ADA had a chronic absence rate of just 5.8%. So that's almost our district goal, not bad. But at the high end, one of those same schools with a 95% ADA actually had 17.3% of students missing a month of school or more that year. So the ADA can actually mask an underlying chronic absence level, and the same goes for truancy. Because truancy is mainly looking at the unexcused absences, it doesn't account for kids who are simply just missing too much school. It could be for illness or any other number of legitimate reasons, but they're missing too much and it is going to have an impact on their learning. If we only focus on truancy, we'll miss those kids altogether. Okay, so chronic absence, how big a problem is it in OUSD? It's a big problem. Last year, although we had some reduction, we were down to 1 out of 10 students missing a month or more of school a year. So that's a lot of kids. When we look at ethnicity groups, we see that African American and Latino students are the most affected, at least among the large ethnicity groups. But when we look at our smaller Native American and Pacific Islander populations, we also see that they have very high rates of chronic absence. Okay, so I'm passing it now back to Curtis. What are we doing?
So, what are we doing? I'm going to talk about what we're doing at the central and then at the school site level. One of the things is that we're really, this past year, been building awareness across the system, and so we've been really taking a targeted universal approach that we're trying to do some things for all schools around understanding and working on absence, and then we've been using our data to drive targeted approaches to really meet the needs where we're seeing the most chronic absence. And we're also developing tools that our schools can use to address chronic absence. And one of the artifacts that we passed around is a new attendance manual that we just came out with a couple months ago. For the first time, we also are generating a chronic absence letter. So by law, we have to send out notice of truancy letters for the unexcused absences. But what we're doing is actually sending out letters to students who are chronically absent as well for the first time this school year. So we're really hoping to see an impact from that. And I'll talk a little bit later about the OEC toolkit, which has also come around, is actually in the picture here on the slide. The other thing, just in terms of what school sites are doing, I'm going to actually save that for our two wonderful principals to discuss. And they'll get into more details on some of the items that are listed here in this slide. And then another key part of our work in doing this is that since making sure that kids attend school every day is really a community issue and a community responsibility. I mean, certainly OUSD, we have a large part of that, but what it takes to actually get kids to school is a community effort, and so our partners are really important in this work. One of our key partners is the Oakland Education Cabinet, which is a collaboration between the City, Mills College, and Oakland Unified. There are 4 subcommittees, and one of those subcommittees focuses on attendance. And Teresa Drenick and Teresa Clincy, sitting here, Teresa Drenick's the Assistant District Attorney, actually co-chair that group. And last year, our project was to actually generate that toolkit that you had a chance to look at. Another key partner is the Oakland Housing Authority. We have about 6,000 students in our district that live in Oakland public housing. And we have a data sharing agreement with the Oakland Housing Authority, and we're doing a lot of program efforts targeted around attendance to really promote school attendance with our families that are living in public housing. And one of our key partners is Hetty Chang, who's a national expert around attendance and promoting attendance. And Hetty actually uses Oakland as her incubator. And so a lot of the things that she takes around the nation is trying and supporting. She starts here and has really been a large support to us even in generating the manual. She works with us in the OEC subcommittee and has actually worked with some of our school sites doing professional development as well. Just a couple of, this is actually a picture of Teresa Drenick, the Assistant DA, hand delivering that toolkit and the posters we developed. And when we did the toolkit, we didn't just mail it to people. We actually, the members of the OEC committee hand delivered a toolkit to every single elementary school, and in almost all cases had at least a 30-minute conversation with the principal to go through that toolkit and show them what was in it and how to use it. This is one of the more popular items in the toolkit, signed off by our superintendent and our mayor, a certificate of achievement around good and or improved attendance. And by the way, that entire toolkit is translated into several languages and is online as well. So schools can just access these tools. And the website is actually right there at the bottom, and you can see that.
Okay, so in 2011-12, we really launched our first year of implementing the strategic plan, and it was really our first year of focusing on chronic absence. Hetty kicked off our all principals meeting that year in August at the beginning of school with a really big education on why chronic absence matters, and then we hit the ground with a campaign to reduce chronic absence in our schools. And that year, here you see the 8 elementary schools, 5 middle schools, and 3 high schools, or high school campuses that showed the biggest end-of-year reductions in our first year of attempting to reduce chronic absence across the system, and one of them is Cliff School, Roosevelt. He'll be talking about later how they did that. And then we also, in August, celebrated the 17 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 1 high school who actually met or exceeded the ultimate district goal of reducing chronic absence to 5% of their students or fewer. Okay, so where we are now, the year-to-date data, we decided to prepare our first year campaign and our year-to-date as of mid-February to show you kind of where we're at compared to where we were last year this time around chronic absence and also satisfactory attendance. So I want to say first that the main reason that we look at chronic absence data year-round, including at the mid-year point where we are now, is so that we can take action during the rest of the year to improve attendance. So otherwise we would just wait till the end of the year and see how we did. For the past 2 years, we produced weekly satisfactory attendance and chronic absence reports for the whole district. And we can compare the year-to-date against the year-to-date last year this time in mid-February. You can see that the district chronic absence rate today is slightly higher than it was this time during the same period last year, but it is still lower than the year-end 2012 rate of 11%. The important point to note here is that we still have a whole semester or half the school year to try to reduce our district chronic absence rate to the balanced scorecard target for next year, for this year, of reducing the overall district rate to 10%. So we're just above 10% now. We have the next semester to drive it down. When we look at the major ethnicity groups, again, year-over-year comparison to this time of year, we can see that we're a little bit higher than we were last year, and that all 4 major ethnicity groups are contributing to the slightly higher rate that we're seeing. And again, we have the rest of this year to try to change that, that pattern. In terms of satisfactory attendance, it's a very similar story. Satisfactory attendance for the year to date is slightly lower than it was at this point last year. And some schools are focusing on groups of students who are right in between satisfactory attendance and chronic absence. We call those kids at risk of becoming chronically absent. They're absent 5.1% to 9.9% of the year to date. Those kids in some schools, they feel like they can move those kids into the satisfactory attendance column, and then they can focus more intensive resources around the kids that are missing too much school. So it's kind of a tiered approach. And again, the important thing is that we have a semester to really increase that satisfactory attendance rate across the system. Similar story for the large ethnicity groups. It's slightly lower satisfactory attendance than it was at this point last year, but still about on par to where we were at the end of last year. And again, we have the rest of the semester to try to drive our end-of-year satisfactory attendance rate up by the 2% that we're shooting for in the balanced scorecard.
So I want to share with you one of the strategies that we implemented this year to help meet the attendance goals outlined in our strategic plan, and that was to provide targeted support to identified school sites. And the schools are listed here on the slide. 8 schools received targeted support, and current data shows that 7 out of those 8 schools have reduced their chronic absence rates since the beginning of the school year. The school sites were selected after reviewing chronic absence data as well as their African American chronic absence data, coordinating with their regional officers, and looking at our Oakland Housing Authority partner schools. We also supported them in several ways. First off, the attendance compliance officer met with each administrator or attendance team and attendance clerk to complete a needs assessment, which identified gaps in their attendance plan. Then they developed an action plan that would be implemented over the year to help them reduce their chronic absence rates. The school sites are visited each week and receive assistance with attendance coding, helping the attendance teams identify their chronically absent students so that interventions can be implemented to reduce those rates of absence. They also assist in training for the conducting of their SART, school attendance review team meetings, and also when necessary, conducting home visits, all with the goals to reduce chronic absences and return students to school. There is also outreach to families, speaking to families about the importance of attendance at back-to-school nights, tabling at Oakland Housing Authority events, as well as attendance assemblies, which take place throughout the year, and some of these events are in collaboration with our Family Engagement Unit. And then finally, the modeling takes place on what follow-up looks like once a student is identified. How do you follow up and support that student and family? And some of it is just small things. For example, one school is visited every week because there's an agreement with a little boy there that if he's there, he gets a treat, a pencil, a certificate, and he hasn't failed yet to be at school when she goes on Tuesdays. So this new strategy has really helped us reduce chronic absence rates at these schools, and we plan to continue this support for the rest of this school year. So I'm going to turn things over now to Kimmy, who's going to talk about regional impact.
For the recording, though? Is it talking? Is that okay? Oh, good. Quality equipment. Good evening. So in Region 3, we have been really attached to this notion of collective impact this year, that we need to move from being a region of a couple excelling schools to really having excellence across our schools, and that's how we've approached our work in reducing chronic absence this year. Last year, we partnered with Hetty Chang. She came and really built our capacity and knowledge around what is chronic absence, what are the ways to intervene, but we still didn't see growth. We looked at data all the time, but again, we still were not seeing the growth. And in fact, we ended last school year with 5 schools that had chronic absence rates that exceeded 20%. So that's 1 out of 5, or in some cases, 1 out of 4 students were missing at least 10% of their school days. Really serious. So this year, kind of shifting to saying, how do we really make a difference together and learn from each other and really put some powerful strategies into motion. So we've moved to really looking at data as a region, and we built a report that actually compares our current chronic absence to the overall data for last year, so that you're not just like, oh, this looks good or medium or bad, but you're actually able to see, oh, you know, we're actually at 18%, but that's 5% less than last year. So that's been a really helpful tool for us. And the other thing is we really look at it together. So it's not like just look at your own data and figure out what you're doing next. It's really saying, wait a minute, what's going on over there that I can actually learn from, and we can spread some strategies across. So this year we have seen some huge reductions, double-digit reductions at 4 schools of 10% or greater. So that's really significant. And then reductions of around 5% at 5 more schools. So we're feeling excited about that. And basically what we did when we really started kind of sharing our strategies is we aggregated what is working and what is making a difference in our schools. And for the schools that are not, growing in the right direction, there's more kids chronically absent, they're not meeting the target, we actually have them, I have them kind of do a weekly update and monitoring of how are you putting these systems into place that we know are working at other schools that are right down the block from you. So we've had really great kind of cross-training, principal to principal, visiting, let me see your systems. This is Carolyn Howard at Howard Elementary that has a 10 or 11% reduction at this point from over 20% last year. And so she's been a wonderful hostess to newer principals in sharing what she's doing to make a huge difference there. And I think I'll turn it over to our great principals next. This is Cliff Hong from Roosevelt.
Good evening, directors and fellow OUSD educators. So first of all, just a little anecdote. My sister, I just went down to LA last week to visit my family and my sister. I was reminded that she actually, in her 13 years of K-12 education, missed not one day, and she actually got this award at the end when she graduated from high school. And so we talked about attendance. So we come from a family that really appreciates attendance, and you should see more from me around that. All right, so let's see. Let's talk attendance. People that know me as someone who wants to build a quality school, not just for the experience for the kids and measuring success by the fulfillment of the students, but also using quantitative measures. So I want to see results. So I'm very into data and numbers. So I was very excited to find out that 2 years ago, my first year as principal at Roosevelt, we had a 15% chronic absence rate, so 15% of our students had missed 10% or more of school by the end of the year, and the following year, last year, a year later, we had dropped that down to 7%. So after the first year, actually it was Mark Triplett at UPA when I saw his numbers, and UPA's been building for a while, and I got very jealous of his numbers because they do a very good job with attendance. And I said, all right, we're putting together an attendance team. So what we did was we put together an attendance team that met weekly, and it was a good cross-section of a lot of our staff members. We had our school nurse be a part of it because we noticed that a lot of the absences purportedly were for illnesses. And so she didn't believe that actually many of those absences were actually due to illness. And so she felt like it was her duty and her role to really ferret out which ones were truly for sicknesses and which ones weren't. So the school nurse, our attendance clerk is extremely strong. She takes those numbers personally as if it's, that's a measure of her effectiveness as an employee for OUSD. We have some great partners, a director of family services who partners with us through EBASI, and we have a coordinator of socio-emotional work through Safe Passages and the Elevate program. And finally, we have several social work interns who've joined us, and they've run reports and those things for us. So we met weekly, and we started off by just creating a flow chart and really thinking very deeply about the details. So a student is absent one time, what do we do? They're absent 5 times, what do we do? At 10 times, what do we do? Where does SART fit in? Where does SARB fit in? And so we created this gigantic flow chart that was, it looked like a bowl of spaghetti on paper. It was really ridiculous, but at least it was a start. And it's been refined over the years, actually partly with the work of Hetty Chang and Attendance Works, and they came and helped to consult with us. So we continue to meet once a week, and we actually use data provided by Gene Wing's team where we get chronic absence numbers, but also the report gives every student by name. And this is where we have to talk a little bit, because then we take that report and I or somebody by hand will put it into an Excel spreadsheet to show over time if the student is going up or down in terms of their attendance rate. So that's a little bit labor intensive, and maybe something we could work together on to have R&D do. But we look at that chart every time we meet, and we look at the kids whose attendance is going up and trying to identify what do we do to make that happen. And for the kids whose attendance is going down, especially we look at that and say, well, what's going on there? So I think through that process, we learned a lot about what was effective, and we're still trying to figure out what to do, because right now our attendance is hovering at about 8%, And so it's not continuing the downward trend, although it's holding steady. It's not continuing the downward trend that we'd expected this year. So I guess I'll just say a little bit about our positive incentives, and then I'll pass it on. Um, the recognition for doing well in attendance, I think, is huge. Many of our kids don't get enough positive attention for anything. So in the packet that this team has created, there's a certificate. And so in our attendance meetings, we now just pass around certificates and we sign them for any kids that we see their attendance going up, and we'll give them that certificate right away that week. And we don't just do it for we do it by growth. So any student who's improved by 5% at the end of the marking period, or from we meet about every 2 weeks now. So any movement during that 2 weeks, we'll make a certificate for that. We're also looking at the end of the year for a promotion ceremony for kids who have improved attendance, to give them a little trophy, but not just recognize the students, but their families as well, because we feel like it's a partnership between families and the kids. And in fact, I shared that idea with my mom, and she said, heck yeah, I should get a trophy. I was the one that drove your sister to school every day and made her go, and that further confirmed this idea that that's probably the right way to go. I think that's all I wanted to share. But you are all invited to join us at any of our attendance team meetings, and thank you for this opportunity to share.
Hello to everyone. I just want to share that at Markham Elementary, attendance is of great importance. We believe attending school every day promotes learning to the maximum potential for every child. And we believe every day counts. And what we do at Markham Elementary, we have chew-in chats, because what I found out is that a lot of parents are not informed of the importance of attendance. And so we brought in Deborah Long, our attendance compliance officer, along with my attendance clerk. Not only those, but we also include our teachers, okay? Because we feel that parents don't just want to hear attendance clerks calling. They need to hear parents as well as myself. And we also have teamed up with a partner, Oakland Housing Authority, and we have a volunteer that comes in 3 times a week. She's calling as well. But those chew-in chats are so informative for parents, and they were like, oh. And I told them, we're going to have to sort some of you if you don't come to school. And I said, I don't want to send you to SARP. I said, and I know you don't want to see the judge. And so they were like, oh, Miss Smith, no. I'm going to get better. I'm going to get better. And let me give you an example. In the mornings, I stand out in front of the school. And this morning, a parent had came in, and she was leaving out with her child. So I didn't even ask her. And she said, Miss Smith, she has a doctor's appointment, but I promise I'll be right back. Right? Because what we found out, parents were taking the kids, but they don't even return. Okay, and they have morning appointments, but what we've encouraged them to do is get those appointments after school. But sometimes there's emergencies where they have to have it sometimes during the school. But she told me right away, Miss Smith, and I didn't even ask her, I promise I'll be right back. So I saw there that she realizes the importance of having children in school and the importance of instruction. But not only chew-in chat, but like I said, we have the SART meetings, and tomorrow I started 41, so hopefully they all will come in the morning. But yes, we're having them once a month, and it's really working, because I'm finding those parents who have been lagging and slacking on coming to school and bringing their children, they're getting there. And I also encourage them, we have free breakfast every morning at 8 o'clock. Come to breakfast, and they will automatically be at school and be on time. So that's promoting parents to get there as well. We also have attendance assemblies, and oh my goodness, the kids love it. We don't just provide certificates for the students who have perfect, because I do believe there are students who are coming every day, but we're also looking at those students who are improving their attendance, and we're acknowledging them as well. And those students who don't get those certificates, they're crying, but guess what? It's motivating them, it's motivating their parents, because they're going home, Mom, I have to go to school. I have to be there. And so I'm really excited. Markham is on the rise. Yes, we're not at 5%, but I promise you we're getting there. And I appreciate, we were at 22% last year. We're down to 19. And with my leadership, I promise you, we will be where we need to be. And I just thank my teacher who stayed with me tonight. He's one of them who calls as well to parents about students who are absent. So I believe building that team and working with our partners, our community, as well as our compliance officers, teachers, attendance clerk, just working as a team, it really promotes that attendance, that positive culture at our school. And I'm just excited about what Markham is doing. And just continue to watch. You can come see and watch what happens at Markham Elementary School.
Particularly from our two principals, that the importance of an attendance team at every school, to need to look at data regularly and year-round, that universal incentives actually increase attendance, family outreach and engagement matters, and that the idea of focusing our limited resources where the need is greatest works. So that's the conclusion of our presentation, and